Have you ever wondered what it's like to retire in Amsterdam, the Netherlands? Well, today we're going to find out. Our special guest is Jeremy Bierbach. Jeremy is originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After graduating from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. in 1996 with a bachelor's degree in linguistics, Jeremy worked as an IT specialist for several years. In 2001, Jeremy emigrated to the Netherlands, and in 2003, he changed his career direction and began studying law at the University of Amsterdam, where he earned a bachelor's degree in Dutch law in 2006 and a master's degree in constitutional and administrative law in 2007. Jeremy subsequently worked as a legal advisor through Avocado Legal, where he focused on immigration and European migration law. In January 2014, Jeremy joined, I'm going to mess this up, Fransen Advocaten, and was
Yeah,
sworn into the
hmm.
Dutch bar as an attorney. Did I do okay?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And in September 2015, he successfully defended his PhD thesis in European constitutional law at the University of Amsterdam. A commercial edition of his thesis, Frontiers of Equality in the Development of U.S. and EU Citizenship, was published in 2017 by Acer Press. He is a member of the Work Group for Legal Aid to Immigrants, WRV, and the Specialist Association of Migration Law Attorneys, SVMA. He also serves on the board member of the Stitching Transmotion, the nonprofit foundation behind the volunteer-run Trans Screen Amsterdam Transgender Film Festival. Wow. His specialty and focus of interest is invoking norms of international law, EU law in particular, as a source of protection for members of minority groups who are unrepresented or underrepresented in the democratic process. In particular, EU citizens, their non-EU citizen family members, and other non-EU citizen immigrants to the Netherlands, including British citizens as former EU citizens. He represented two non-EU citizens, PNS, and challenging the Dutch state law on the laws providing for a fine to be imposed on immigrants who do not pass the civic integration exam. The underlying questions of EU law were ultimately referred to and decided by the Court of Justice in the European Union in 2015, establishing important limits on the extent of which immigrants can be penalized without a complete examination of their personal circumstances and needs. Well, Jeremy, that's quite a bio. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. We appreciate you. And tell us your story. Tell us why you chose Amsterdam as a city in the Netherlands, and what made you make the move from Pittsburgh.
Okay, good. Okay, now I'll tell you. So, yeah, Amsterdam is just a place. It's a magical city, and I literally fell in love with it the very first time I ever came here. I was 19 years old, and I was on my way to Munich, where I was going to start my junior year abroad at the University of Munich. And I flew KLM, and so I had a layover in Amsterdam with KLM, and it was like an 8-hour layover. So I just, said, well, I'll go check out the center of the city, and got on a train, which got me to Amsterdam Central Station in 15 minutes. And I just walked out, and and I walked down. I just walked a few blocks, and I don't know. I was just very impressed with it. There's something there's something very beautiful. There's something very, people often describe the look of the Netherlands as being like Legoland. There's this, I mean, especially Amsterdam. There's this very sort of picturesque, um, these picturesque, facades of buildings, all lined up, sort of identically, and canals and bicycle paths, and I was just already fascinated, and because I studied German as part of my degree, and that's why I was studying in Germany. I was a German minor. I was a German minor, um, I was walking down the street and I was like looking at storefronts and I was like, I can already read this. If you speak German, you can already read Dutch. I could even read newspaper headlines. And I was like, I picked the wrong country to go to.
Mm,
And, so then I got on my plane and like, to Munich and arrived there that night, but it was already sort of like, oh. And I couldn't stop thinking about Amsterdam. And
wow.
luckily, because I was studying linguistics and I was in the linguistics faculty at the University of Munich, first thing I did, one of the first classes I enrolled for was a Dutch course
Dutch.
at the University of Munich, taught in German. But I mean, when you speak like I said, when you speak German, um, Dutch is really easy to learn, and I'd had it since junior high. German's more difficult. German's more complicated. It's sort of like if you learn Latin first and then step down to Spanish, something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example, but so I just made it my life goal. And during that year that I lived in Germany, I came to Amsterdam at least 2 or 3 more times. Went, also across the border to Maastricht. That was about one time made it like a sort of weekend trip from Munich to get as close to the Netherlands as I could. And that was in Maastricht in the south. Another very beautiful city, very different. But
I see.
So yeah, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with, I don't know, but I fell in love with, what I like to say is I fell in love with the infrastructure more than anything else. It was really just seeing how things can be so well planned out to be human size, um, to be so welcoming, just by the very architecture of a place. I often like to say, if some aliens, took over the Earth, and then they wanted to create a truly complete zoo of all the animal species on Earth, for their own entertainment, the habitat for Homo sapiens would look like Amsterdam.
Hmm.
That's what I love about it. It's
Good
sort of
analogy.
like everything. It's sort of natural artificial. It's sort of like, okay, imagine these alien anthropologists, looking, or these alien zoologists looking at human beings and being like, okay, well, we know they come from Africa. We know they come from the savannah. They like flat, grasslands. They okay, so we'll make a city that's flat and not too many mountains or anything like that. We'll make it, that there's plenty of water everywhere, parks to walk in, that they can ride their bicycles everywhere, and then okay, then the animals in this habitat will be pretty happy. That's what I think of Amsterdam as.
Awesome. Tell us, geographically, where is Amsterdam located within the Netherlands? And tell us where is exactly the Netherlands in the EU?
Well, I mean, I'll start with where the Netherlands is. There's the really famous quote from Napoleon, who described the Netherlands as little more than the silt that is dumped out by our rivers. That is, like, geographically, that is an accurate description of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is largely the Rhine River Delta. So if you have the Rhine, which rises in Switzerland, I believe, and then you have the Meuse, which rises in France, and they join together, around, the Meuse comes up past Maastricht, and the Rhine comes in, from Germany, and they join. But the nature of the geography of the Netherlands, it is a delta. It's sort of no different than, say, like, the delta of the Mississippi in Louisiana, or Bangladesh, for that matter. So it's most of the country is very flat, because it's not characterized by mountains that were formed in prehistoric times. It's very sandy, very flood prone. So it's at the northwest corner of Europe, um, sort of bordered by Belgium to the south, and Germany to the east, and then a short, about 8-hour boat ride across the North Sea to England, and that's the location of the Netherlands.
Right.
And where's the location of Amsterdam in the Netherlands? It's in the northwest as well of the Netherlands. Um, it's definitely situated, in what is known as the north of the Netherlands, but not the far north. And it's situated in the west of the Netherlands, which is the urbanized part of the Netherlands. The Netherlands really has almost too equally divided areas of population.
Okay.
Total population is about 18 million people, but about half of that population lives in the heavily urbanized western area called the Randstad. So Amsterdam, uh, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht make up a circular metropolitan area uh, called Edge. Randstad means literally edge city. It's a sort of donut-shaped area of um, urban development, and in the middle is what's called the Green Heart. The middle is still like farms, but the idea of the Randstad is, you know, Amsterdam itself is not a, Amsterdam is the biggest city in the Netherlands, but it's still not a big city by American standards. It's only about 850,000 people in population. But if you take the entire Randstad, then you're looking at like 8 million people or 9 million people. So the entire Randstad can actually be compared to New York City in a lot of ways. I can say that same kind of number of people, same kind of dense public transit networking. Like there's a train system which is actually, in a sense, comparable to the subway system in New York. Just like you can get from the Bronx to Brighton Beach if you really want to by
Well, you know
subway.
you're in New York.
Yeah, but would it take about an hour and a half? Well, I know the movie The Warriors. That's what I always think of. I always
Oh, I
think of that.
remember that.
Yeah, that's a classic movie. But yeah, the Randstad is like that as well. Like for me in Amsterdam, getting anywhere in that urbanized area will take me from door to door no longer than an hour and a half by public transit.
So what's the
Um,
climate like? So if you're
the,
in the Northwest, I'm
Mhm.
thinking cold winters and kind of dark winters and
Yeah, northwest of Europe. If you draw everywhere in Europe is north of where what almost everything in the United States. If you draw a line directly across the globe,
where am I?
Amsterdam is roughly between Vancouver and the tail of Alaska.
Okay,
That's our latitude.
that
Whereas
may,
Madrid, which we think of as warm, when we think of as like warm Southern Europe, that's the same latitude as New York City.
is it
So
okay? I could see that.
yeah,
Yeah,
Madrid in Spain.
because Madrid gets cold in the winter and warm in the summer, and yeah, I can
Yeah,
definitely see that.
but it doesn't get as cold as New York City. What keeps Europe warm for now until climate change starts changing that is the Gulf Stream. So the only reason we don't have the only reason we're not quite as cold as somebody who would be in the middle of British Columbia would be is because there's this stream of warm water pumped up from the Caribbean toward northern Europe, which keeps it
That's a good thing.
temperate here. But the northern latitude, there's one thing you can't do. There's one thing that no stream of warm ocean water can fix, and that's that we're simply astronomically at a high latitude, and it means that the days in the winter are very short. The days of light are less than 8 hours. Sun goes up around 9. And in December, mid December, sun goes up around maybe 9:15, goes down again at 4:30 p.m.
Wow,
Pitch
it
black by
goes up
5:30
at
p.m.
9 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
So I can't even imagine that.
So you get up in darkness, you
And
go
you
to
go
work
to
in darkness, and you come home from work in darkness. But in the summertime, it's the opposite,
so
and then
it's
it's
it's light.
glorious.
It's light almost all day long, right?
Hmm. It's light until around June 21st, around the summer solstice. You can be out in the park, and you can be like, "Oh, gee, what time is it? It feels like 7." Like, "Oh, it's 10:30."
So it's still sunny at 10:30 at night in the
Yeah, it's still
summer.
sunny at 10:30 at night, and then the sun
Wow.
will really set by 11:30.
No wonder why
Um,
people eat dinner late.
I guess that's more Spain thing.
That's
Here,
yeah,
in Spain, people eat dinner late. They sleep in the middle of
because
the day
it's so hot.
traditionally.
Because
Yeah,
it's so hot during the day. Okay. So is living in an LGBTQ community important to you? And
yeah,
if so, is there such a thing in Amsterdam, or is it pretty integrated?
yeah. Well, Amsterdam, historically was known as the gay capital of Europe, or some people said the gay capital of the world. I don't think everyone said it was the gay capital of the world, but it used to be said it was the gay capital of Europe. So, um, it developed in the Netherlands because of the famous tradition of tolerance. in the Netherlands, which basically grew out of, the entire history of the Netherlands. The great majority of the history of the Netherlands is a history of religious conflict. All the religious wars that split Europe for years and years and years, starting from the 1600s. Always the dividing line went straight through the Netherlands. The Treaty of Utrecht, where it was finally settled that, okay, this part of Europe is going to be Protestant and this part of Europe is going to be Catholic, literally went through the city of Utrecht, which is about 30 miles south of Amsterdam. And so even to this day, everywhere north of that line in the Netherlands is traditionally overwhelmingly Protestant, and everywhere south of that line is traditionally overwhelmingly
Catholic.
Roman Catholic, which creates still, a visible difference in the culture. This is a tiny country, we're a country the size of, I don't know, New Jersey or something like that.
So
but
what's more tolerant? And I hate that
well,
word tolerant.
the reason for tolerant? The reason why I start off with that tradition, that history of like religious conflict, was because a lot of the ways that because for people to live together in one small country, the notion of tolerance originally developed as a sort of like, okay, well, you stay over there and you do your thing, and I'll stay over here and I'll do our thing, and we won't bother each other. It was not a very loving concept. Let's put it this way. It was sort of like a ceasefire, concept, especially in areas where there were both Protestants and Catholics living in the same city. There were some areas where they were mixed. They lived very segregated lives. If you were Protestant, your entire family was Protestant. You went to Protestant schools. Your parents read a Protestant newspaper. They voted for a Protestant political party. You went to the baker. That was the Protestant, not the baker across the street that was Catholic. If you were Catholic, it was the other way around. And so the Netherlands was good at, whatever there was of Dutch culture. It was a lot of it was about this live and let live concept. And that also then made it fertile ground for a sort of vibrant gay culture to develop in the 60s and 70s. Of course, the 60s were a decade of upheaval and change in a lot of ways. But gay culture was one of the things that flourished, especially in the 60s. But even before that, there were always sort of, more than other places in Europe, it was easier to live a sort of don't ask, don't tell gay life. The oldest gay bar in Amsterdam, which is still open, or reopened, I should say it, I can look this up, is I think almost 100 years old now. Since 1927. The oldest gay bar in Amsterdam opened in 1927. It's called it Mantje. It was run by a butch lesbian named Bet Beere, who was sort of famous as being sort of like very tough butch, leather jacket wearing, maybe motorcycle driving lesbian. And it was a sort of open secret, that this bar was a gay bar, and there were certain signals. But this was still a time of great repression.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an owl, which is still there. You can see it inside the door, where the eyes would light up. The owl was also a lamp. She would flip a switch if the cops were at the door, and then all the men who were dancing with men and all the women who were dancing with women would switch partners really fast to pair up man woman when the cops came in, and then Bet would say, well, "What are you bothering me for?" And apparently, so that bar actually sort of, it closed when Bet died, maybe in the 50s or something like that, or 1983. Apparently, I'm looking at the history now on the internet, and apparently, though, her family didn't really care to reopen it, and it actually just literally remained closed like a vault for almost for 20. I'm looking at the history now. 1983. From 1983 until 2008, it was just closed like a vault, and then in 2008 it was reopened, but it was reopened as a sort of living museum,
like a museum. Yeah,
it's a neat place to go to. So what they did was they sort of revived the decor that had been in there at the time they opened up the vault, because at the time they opened up the vault, there were all these papers and posters and scraps of paper and people's phone numbers pinned to the wall, and they took all of those original papers out and they went to the Amsterdam Municipal Museum, and they made a really high quality scan of all that, and they made wallpaper out of it. So
Cool.
so you see
So
a
everyone's
replica
phone
on the
numbers.
walls of all the stuff that was all the stuff that was on all the flyers for sex workers, all the numbers that people wrote on a notepad, writing
Wow.
down the, their contact info for the dates they made there.
So do you live in like an LGBTQ neighborhood, like a gayborhood, or
That doesn't exist
it
here.
doesn't
That
exist?
no, that
It's
concept
so
doesn't
free
exist.
and open that doesn't matter.
It's that, and it's also that it's such there's a perpetual housing shortage in Amsterdam. So even if there were a
A
gayborhood,
gayborhood, you couldn't get
it's
in
you
there.
yeah, you just it's you take what you get. That's how it works with housing in Amsterdam. You look and look, and you can't be too picky. You can't say I
We'll
definitely want to live in that neighborhood.
we'll get to
Um,
that as well. So yeah, I'd like to know about that too. Speaking of that, we might as well go into that now. Um, what is it like, or how much would you pay for to buy a house in Amsterdam or a condo?
mhm,
And what is it like a rental cost? And how about
mhm,
utilities? We can talk about that as well.
mhm. Okay, that's a good question. Well, almost everything you're gonna be buying or renting in Amsterdam is, I suppose, what you would call, or if you're buying, is what Americans would call a condo, meaning, like an actual freestanding house. Buying an actual freestanding house in Amsterdam,
Doesn't
that's
exist.
not that much of it. I mean, there would be at most it'd be row houses, or in some more outer neighborhoods, there'll be like duplex houses where you could buy one half of that. That's about as much actual house, as much freestanding house as you can find here. So I mean, it's a city of apartments. It's a city of
Hmm.
apartments, and you'd buy an apartment.
Right.
So you could buy a studio apartment in central Amsterdam. But what I mean by central Amsterdam is what we call inside the ring. That's generally agreed on as what is the most sort of desirable area of Amsterdam to live, is anywhere inside the ring. I mean that's more than a neighborhood, of course. That's like 60
R-
neighborhoods, but
Right.
so you can, that is what you can choose to do. You can, but yeah, inside the ring, a studio apartment, we're talking maybe like 400 square meters, or 400 square feet. Sorry, I'm doing the conversion in my head.
Hmm.
Square meters to square feet is about a factor of 10.
Yeah.
So if you want a, modest studio apartment with 400 square feet, where you'd ideally be living as a single person or living as a very in love couple, to live in such a small
Cozy.
space.
Very
Yeah,
cozy.
very cozy in love couple. That will run you at least 370K, 370,000 euros to buy that.
It's not cheap
No, it's not cheap.
by any means. How about like what do you think a two bedroom
Two
would go
bedroom,
for?
550K, 600K.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that's like US prices. Well, pretty much
Yeah.
on
Add add you know add 10% for the conversion from dollars to
right.
euros.
Okay.
So so 600 euro
600
K
and
is
up.
660 USK, I
Yeah,
suppose. And
it's expensive.
mhm.
How about rentals? Like the rental market if you wanted to rent an apartment.
If you wanted to rent a two-bedroom apartment, you'd be looking at 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 a month, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah,
And
it
studio,
sounds like
maybe 1,200, 1,300.
it's pretty much the same as here. I mean, and Phoenix has increased in value of real estate, over the past year or so. But yeah, so those prices are pretty up there, and so I guess you get what you pay for. And Amsterdam is a desirable place, and it's hard to get. Let's talk about how do people get apartments. I mean, you're saying their space is limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just have to
Be
fight
lucky.
and wait and get lucky and hear about something. Um, yeah, and
Do you own
pay.
yours? Do you own yours?
I own a studio apartment, which is really, of all the ironies in the world. You know, I bought a studio apartment right after I graduated from law school. You know, I had a failed marriage behind me, and all the other, you know, dating and relationships I had weren't working out, and I was 32 years old. I said, that's it. You know, I'm just gonna be single for the rest of my life. I'm just gonna get my little piece of real estate ground floor apartment for me and my cat, so that I can put in a cat door and he can go outside.
Hmm.
And the irony is, as soon as I, you know, established my happiness, you know, with my little studio apartment, literally 6 weeks after I took possession of that apartment, I met my current husband, who I've now been together with for 16 years, married to for almost 6 years. And
Wow.
you know, but it was way too small for us both to live in. So, I mean, I lived by we had a crosstown relationship for 6 years until we finally moved in, and then since then I've been renting it out to various friends of mine. Um,
So what type of place are you living in now? Like how much, how big?
we live in a rental apartment, which we live in a he got really lucky. And it is one of the things where, you know, he just got fabulously lucky, and he heard about his mom was standing at the bus stop and literally was chatting with some lady, and she said, "Oh, well, I work for this real estate company. We happen to have this apartment that's opening up that the people are moving out of. Does he want to take a look?" And that was also a few months into our relationship that he really lucked out and got a place about 580 square feet, one bedroom, but you know, it's about the minimum that we need, you know, to
Right.
not be
That's
bumping elbows
cool.
too much. Yeah.
That's great. Um, okay. How about utilities? Are they expensive, like
Right now,
electric,
yes,
gas?
because of the war. Because of the war,
Okay.
yeah. Europe made a mistake by becoming far too dependent on Russian gas. For years, you know, the Netherlands itself was a producer of gas as well. The Netherlands became fabulously wealthy by discovering a big bubble of natural gas under the North Sea in the 70s, and also in under the northern gas, especially heating was so cheap, you know, in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands produced so much of its own. Now the Netherlands had to stop producing it because it's run out, and also, in fact, the pumping of gas in the northern Netherlands has caused earthquakes and has caused
Oh
actual
boy.
structural damage to people's houses. So, you know, the Netherlands had to stop producing gas, but then, you know, all of Europe, meanwhile, became overly optimistic that it was a really good idea to get um, more economically integrated with Russia. That if we bought, you know, gas and oil from Russia, that would help encourage peace in Europe. But instead, it had the opposite effect of creating a dictator, Putin, who got them a little too overeager to take slices of neighboring countries in the former Soviet Union. So that's where we are. So ever since the war between, you know, ever since Russia invaded Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia have started, our um, our gas bill has skyrocketed. So we have to be a little more careful with energy.
Yeah. So what would you say is what do you pay for a month for gas? You know?
Currently, I mean, I think it's gonna be readjusted by our energy company, but I think currently it's like 200 a month.
Wow, that's a lot
Yeah,
for uh
yeah.
for the
So in
square
any case,
footage.
yeah,
And
in any case,
how
now that
about
people,
electric?
it's a poorly insulated apartment. You know, we due to it being cheap rent, we've got a landlord who is not very motivated to do any upgrades or make it more energy efficient.
How about electric? Is
Well,
that
that's
expensive?
together. Our total electricity bill
Okay.
is 200, but I think
Oh, okay.
I don't know which.
That's electric and gas?
Yeah, I can actually
That's not too bad.
let me look in my app and see what part is.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay, yeah, it's slightly depressing, but yeah, no. When we, I definitely know if we upgrade, if we are able to like move into a larger place, you know, and we probably will move outside the ring, because now we really are. Now we're old enough that, you know, we really would actually like more space rather than more access to the central city. But yeah, we'll be putting solar panels on the roof,
Yeah.
and we'll be not, you know, all that there's a big push in the Netherlands to get off of gas altogether. So new housing developments are electric only. So, and they have heat pumps. And so the idea is, if you just get rid of the gas network when building new homes, that'll motivate people to make use of more energy efficient options like heat pumps and induction. So it's all turning into, I'll miss cooking on gas. It'll be, cooking on an induction stove, but it's worth
How about price of groceries? Is that
That's
expensive
great.
or
Price of groceries is great. That's one thing, that's one thing that's extremely affordable and extremely high quality.
is food
And food. Well, food, yeah, exactly.
like produce?
Ingredients, produce.
Produce.
Going out is way more so the price of food is lower and the quality of food is higher when you buy it in the supermarket compared to the US.
Hmm.
The Netherlands is a major agricultural producer. There's very high quality produce coming from the Netherlands. There's very high quality produce coming from the rest of the European Union. One of the pillars of the European Union is subsidizing farmers to produce good quality products that might not be so lucrative for them. So you have access to all the delicious things. Fresh
Mm.
mozzarella from Italy,
Yeah,
cheeses
like
from France.
like I just witnessed.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Before we began this podcast, I polished off a caprese salad that my husband whipped up for me. It was really delicious.
And it looked delicious. Mm-mm-mm. So tell the audience, is it difficult to meet friends or gay people in Amsterdam, or is it pretty easy?
No, pretty easy. I mean, yeah, there's a large gay scene. I mean, it's different than it used to be. I mean, everything's changing. Of course, it has to do with generational changes. There was historically there were three commercial neighborhoods. I don't describe them as neighborhoods where people live because nobody would ever like live in one of those neighborhoods where the gay bars clustered. In fact, I think it wouldn't have been really none of them would have been really nice places to live, to be honest. But there were places where there were commercial entertainment districts where gay bars clustered, and so one of them was the Reguliersdwarsstraat, one of the most difficult to pronounce names of a street
I'm not
for
going to even
non-Dutch
try.
speakers. People just call it, people who can't speak Dutch, they call it the gay street, and everyone knows what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Reguliersdwarsstraat was a street that at its peak, like when I first moved here in 2001, it had a huge cluster of gay bars. It was like the hive mind of gay bars. There were like 7 in one narrow street, and they do
Hmm.
still sort of cluster in the middle. And it's a pedestrian only street. And so in the summertime, what's nicest about that there's a cluster of 4 gay bars that's left in the middle. In the summertime, it turns into a sort of permanent street party on weekends. Where it's more people just get their beer from. It doesn't matter where you get your beer from. You're just standing out on the street with everybody. That's kind of nice. The bars
So,
themselves are not much to write home about, but
so when I hear Amsterdam, I kind of equate it to like Las Vegas. Do they have like a red light district in
mm-hmm.
Amsterdam as well?
Yep. So Amsterdam got big, as a harbor. It's Amsterdam actually is one of the youngest cities in Europe. It didn't have much of an existence in the Middle Ages, for instance. Most of the really old cities, in Europe, go back as far to the Roman Empire, or became big in the Middle Ages. But Amsterdam wasn't even the most important city in the Netherlands for a long time. The most important cities in the Netherlands, or the Low Countries, as sometimes they're described historically, because the Netherlands and Belgium, were sort of one unit for many years of their history. Were Haarlem, which is in between Amsterdam and the North Sea coast, and Antwerp. Those were the real medieval centers, of religion and commerce. And Amsterdam was a swamp. Amsterdam was on a floodplain of the flood-prone Amstel River,
Hmm.
and it wasn't until some local farmers and residents got together and banded together to dam the Amstel and tame it
Damn the
that
Amstel,
that it became habitable, that it
Amsterdam.
became a habitable area. And then what also superpowered the rise of Amsterdam as a power was that it turned into a major trading center. It turned into, because it was kind of a new city. Then this is the magic of Amsterdam. Because it was kind of a new city, it attracted migration from a lot of places. A lot of places in the rest of the Netherlands, a lot of places in the rest of Europe. People started flocking to Amsterdam. It became a sort of place where you could make it. Sort of if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere.
Anywhere.
It's no surprise that New York is New Amsterdam.
There you
New
go.
York is founded on that Amsterdam spirit of being an entrepot, of being a place of trade, a place where you wouldn't be judged. You could anybody could come there, any religion, and so it was this thriving trading center.
That's awesome. And tell us
But that also then where you get trade, where you get sailors, you get hookers, and that's why the oldest part of Amsterdam, the part of Amsterdam that was the first habited part, the part that was called Old Side, Oude Zijds, that is the heart of what's now the red light district. That is one of the oldest businesses, not just the oldest profession in the world, but it's pretty much the oldest business
right.
in Amsterdam.
And also, when I think of Amsterdam, I think people say, oh, they have so many hash bars. Tell us a little bit about that. Does that still exist?
Yeah, it still exists, but Amsterdam or the Netherlands is now a backwater compared to the rest of the world. Half of the United States has fully legalized weed, and I think even Germany just actually legalized weed, although they legalized it in a weird way. There's not actually shops where you can get it, but you have to sort of grow your own or join a club of people growing their own. And in the Netherlands, which famous for legal weed, it's still not actually legal. Still not actually legal. It's still actually on the books. It is still in the criminal code. That, of course, it's decriminalized. It's been decriminalized for a very long time. I mean, you'll never get jail time. For having less than an ounce of weed. Possessing less than an ounce of weed. I mean, it would be what's considered would be considered the equivalent of a misdemeanor. But then there's also prosecution guidelines that say they won't actually prosecute private individuals for possession of personal amounts. Sort of this idea of we got better things to do. But how it works out, again, this goes back to the tradition of toleration in the Netherlands. It's tolerated. So there's a marijuana industry that is tolerated. And it grew out of sort of youth cultural centers in the late 60s and late 70s. That was a time of of great upheavals in the culture, and young people didn't really have anywhere to go. They often had to live at home until the age of 28, until they could get their own place. So they needed places to gather, and so a lot of places were squatted. A lot of empty buildings were squatted, and young people turned them into places where bands would play and people could hang out and drink beer. But then it also evolved that a lot of these youth cultural centers, which were called coffee shops, people go to drink coffee, there would end up being a sort of one corner of the space where there would always be a dealer sitting at a table selling hash and weed, and it became institutionalized in that way. It came to be that then the cops and the public prosecutor's office came to inventorize which places had their little house dealer, and they said, okay, they would go there and be like, okay, we know about you, do your thing. Stick to the rules. Don't sell to anybody under 18. Don't sell don't sell hard drugs. Don't sell anything that's harder than weed or hash.
Mm-hmm.
Don't sell any extracts of weed or hash. Don't sell more than a couple grams per person per transaction, something like that. And then we'll leave you alone. If you toe the line, we'll leave you alone. So that's what then evolved into what's called a coffee shop. So a place that calls itself a coffee shop, and also they're not allowed to expressly advertise that they sell weed there. So
right.
Place, if it says coffee shop in English on the then you know what it means. It doesn't mean they sell coffee there. They're not allowed to put a marijuana leaf, on the front to make it that obvious. But if it's called a coffee shop, that's what it means. That's a place you don't go to drink coffee. In fact, the coffee is notoriously bad in all those places. Notoriously bad.
That's funny.
They'll give you, if you really have to ask for a coffee at one of those places, they'll give you like a Senseo or something like that, or some sort of dishwater coffee.
So If I moved to Amsterdam, would I have to speak Dutch?
I
Or
recommend
do
you don't have to.
do
You
people
don't
speak
have to.
English?
Yeah, I mean, it is. The Netherlands, um, like the Netherlands is up there with the Scandinavian countries as being the parts of Europe. I mean, aside from, of course, England, where or the non-native speaking parts, the non-native English speaking parts of Europe, where fluency in English is the highest level. Because like the Netherlands, like Sweden, like Denmark, these are all countries that realize that nobody's going to learn their language. They have a consciousness of not speaking, a language that's spoken by that many people in the world, and so the educational system is very much oriented toward making sure that Dutch kids learn to speak other languages from an early age. And historically, it used to be in the Dutch educational system that it was expected of an educated Dutch person to be able to speak English, German,
English.
and French.
Wow.
It used to be common, in the upper levels of schools that you weren't considered to be properly educated unless you spoke
Educated.
4 languages. But German and French have fallen by the wayside. French,
I'm surprised
unfortunately, has
because you're
lost
so
in
close.
yeah, French has lost in relevance in on the world scene. German, any Dutch speaker can speak good enough German.
Right. It's
Any
close.
Dutch speaker without ever having taken German lessons can sort of speak fake German, and so that's left it that the only major foreign language that anybody really studies here is English, and so
English.
that means that all Dutch people speak, mm, you know, varying degrees of good English, definitely enough to get business done. It's always about
Hmm.
getting that transaction done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
the Dutch are nothing if about business and trade, and so um, you know anybody working a cash register, even if they're not highly educated, they'll speak enough English to do the transaction. They won't be bothered by the fact that you're not conducting the transaction in Dutch. But what I do say to my clients, I really, from day one, I say, go out of your way to make an effort to learn Dutch. Do it.
I
You
agree.
will not absorb it.
I
This,
agree.
especially
And
in Amsterdam.
you're missing so much too
Yeah,
of part of the
especially in
culture.
Amsterdam. You will not absorb it by osmosis. Absolutely not. You will not. There will never be a situation where you'll be forced to speak Dutch, where it'll be sink or swim.
Right.
Never. You really have to go out of your way. You have to pay somebody. You have to,
Right.
you have to pay a teacher. You have to pay a school, enroll in classes, make an effort, because it makes a difference in your life. It makes a real difference in your life. It's a difference between living life in black and white and living it in color, to use the sort of Wizard of Oz metaphor.
And I kind of think that if you make an attempt speaking Dutch and you're not doing so well, that somebody might in a business start speaking English to you. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to even learn Dutch
Mm-hmm.
because you want to really speak Dutch, but you're having trouble.
Yeah,
So
and you have to be patient. You have to just take that on. You will have to push. You will have to say, "I'm really sorry. I'm trying to speak Dutch to you. Please speak Dutch back to me." And some people will get it, some people don't. Um,
and vowels
I've
are
you know
different.
I've cut off friends, or not, they weren't maybe friends, but there are people who I sort of just made a decision not to become friends with because they didn't respect that I wanted to speak Dutch with them. You get a lot of Dutch people who think it's really nice and fun and exotic to have international friends, and they like to speak their English. They like to
Right.
show off their English, and they sort of there's something in there. There's something either it's like they want to show off their English, or there's something in their brain that makes them, out of a feeling of sympathy or feeling sorry for you. Oh, you're trying so hard to speak Dutch, but I don't want to make it harder for you. I'm
Right.
just going to switch back to speaking English. And those are the kind of people, if they kept doing that, I would say, I don't think this
Yeah,
is going to work out as a friendship.
I got you. I understand. I totally understand because, you're living in the country. You should learn the language of the country. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of like, how did you, so you were fluent when you pretty much got there, right?
I was fluent
Well,
when I
you
got
were,
here. I was a freak. Yeah, I mean, I was fluent. I was fluent in written Dutch. I mean, I was fluent in Dutch as a written language. I've read a lot of Dutch newspapers. In between my year in Germany and going back to the US. So I went back to the US. I graduated. I had my final year at Georgetown. Left DC in 1996 to move to the West Coast chase the .com boom, the first one, but I always kept reading Dutch newspapers. And luckily for the internet coming up, that meant that I could read things on the internet. I could practice my Dutch online. I even had a coworker who was Dutch, funnily enough,
Wow.
at the last place I worked in San Francisco, and he and I would
Talk.
enormously annoy our coworkers all the time by speaking Dutch with each other. And 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 then when that was a great job, by the way. It was a great company that I worked at. But when we went bust because of the whole industry going bust at the end of the year 2000, that's when I decided I don't necessarily have to stay, in the tech industry in San Francisco. I'm going to follow my dream and I'm going to move to Amsterdam. And that's when I made the move at the beginning of 2001. And George W. Bush getting elected was also another push. I didn't want to stick around for that.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about the arts and culture scene in Amsterdam.
It's huge. I mean, I have a lot of one part of my law practice is helping people get artist visas, and so I have a large number of clients who um, are they usually graduate from an art institute in Amsterdam. There are several. There's a major visual arts institute called the Rietveld Institute and a graduate program called Sandberg Institute. There's a performing arts institute here, and there is a fashion design institute here as well, all in
Hmm.
Amsterdam. And
Yeah, Amsterdam's a
and
pretty major city for culture, I
mhm.
think.
Yeah, and there's lots of art spaces. I mean,
So
there's
you have
world
galleries.
class. Yeah, I mean, at the top you have the world class museums of the Rijksmuseum, which houses all the most famous Dutch masters. The most famous of which is the Night Watch by Rembrandt. You have the
Wow.
Stedelijk Museum, which is a major modern art museum, which also has um, a lot of very captivating exhibitions. You have the Photography Museum, the Foam Museum. Um, just so many places. When you live here, you can pay 65 euros a year, or off the top of my head, something about that, for what's called a museum card. And it gives you unlimited free access to all the public museums in the
That's
Netherlands. So it's only with the
wow, that's
exception of a
cool.
few very privately run, museums. I never get my money out of it. I know that I'm subsidizing. My husband and I are definitely subsidizing all the museums in the Netherlands by spending together 120 or 130 a year, when we would have saved money by actually just paying entry the few times that we go.
But
So
it's a
it's
good
all,
cause. It's a
but
good
it's nice.
cause.
Yeah, it's nice to know that you can just walk into a place whenever you
Right,
want.
right. How about live theater?
Live theater. There's live theater. I mean, there's even now a theater which has only English language productions called the International Theater Amsterdam
Wow.
on Leidseplein. It used to be called the City Theater of Amsterdam, but then 2 years ago it was converted to the ITA, International Theater Amsterdam. So all the productions there are are not Dutch language. I mean, most of live theater is still Dutch language, though.
Okay.
That is something to recall. That even if Dutch people do speak fluent English, that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to seek out all their entertainment in
In
English. They don't
English.
want to have to. They don't want to have to. They don't want to have to like read subtitles. There is a huge. Well, maybe Dutch films somewhat, but I mean, there's a huge Dutch language theater scene. I know this because my husband worked for the major musical production company in the Netherlands for many years, and he still does a lot of jobs. He works as a costume designer, and the big money makers in the theater world are Dutch language musicals, usually typically translations of musicals from the English speaking world. So, The Bodyguard in Dutch, Mamma Mia in Dutch.
Wow.
Um, but those are huge money spinners because like I said, even though the Dutch people do speak fluent English, if they want an experience of going out and being entertained, then they'd rather have it be in Dutch, of course.
How about the restaurant scene? Are you a foodie? You like to eat out?
Yeah,
Do you go out?
yeah. We love to go out. I mean, it's too much, to eat. Patting my patting my ample belly right now as I say that. Although, I have to admit, my husband and I we're sort of more middle brow eaters. We like to go out and get good burgers. There's a really good burger scene here. That's a real thing. That's come up in the last 10 years. Gourmet burgers.
Wow.
And of course, we're famous for fries here, French fries,
Are you?
which
Oh, okay.
originated in Belgium. The whole Low Countries. That's one of the culinary areas of excellence, is the idea of French fries or Belgian fries or Flemish fries as they're called, which are thick, and they're fried. They're first blanched. The trick is to first blanch them, to first like um, cook them briefly, and then fry them again, and that creates this perfectly crispy jacket on the fry with a perfectly sort of mashed potato inside.
Sounds so good.
Mhm.
You guys do cheeseburgers? Or no?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or is that a
So the
U.S. thing?
gourmet burger scene, yeah, they'll be like, yeah, exactly. You get it with cheese and bacon, whatever. So
Sounds really
that's
good.
good. That's good. But it's expensive. I mean, even that's the thing. I said groceries are cheap when you go to the supermarket,
But dining is
but
expensive.
dining is expensive, and because labor is expensive, rightly so. You don't have, people get paid living wages. Somebody can have a full-time job, working in a restaurant, and they
Unlike
can
the
they can live.
U.S.,
They can pay
where
the
they
rent,
don't
and they're not struggling.
they
They can
don't
even have
pay
kids.
U.S. they don't pay their waiter or waitress staff, so that's why they rely on tips.
Yeah.
Does Amsterdam um, accept tips? Like
Yes. Yeah.
you do?
It's the idea is, but it's not seen as tipping is not seen as an obligation in order to make it possible for this person to actually live. It's seen as a sign of appreciation, and so you round up. So the bill is 18.50. You say make it 20, and tipping is always done here as it has to be done as a personal gesture. It would be considered actually to be an insult to just leave money behind on a table and walk away. So
So there's no
tipping
such
always has
thing
to be
as
done.
they're not looking for like a 20%,
No.
because if we don't leave 20%,
Hmm.
you're like, oh, something's
Yeah.
really wrong
Something's
either
really
with
wrong.
you or the service.
Yeah.
So
That's not expected. It's not expected. It's
yeah,
always appreciated. Always appreciated. And even giving no tip is not seen as any sort of message. If it's not taken badly. It's not like the waiter would chase after you and be like, "Did I do something wrong?"
I prefer it that way. Are there like also 5-star restaurants? I'm
Oh
sure
yeah,
they're really good,
yeah.
Michelin
There's
rated.
there's a bunch of Michelin restaurants. We've only ever been to. Oh, I've been to another one. Oh, I've been to a really nice seafood restaurant that's a Michelin star,
I
and
love seafood.
we went to there's the best Japanese. What a lot of Japanese people say is the best Japanese restaurant in Europe
Hmm.
is in Amsterdam. That's a Michelin starred restaurant. That's a kaiseki, meaning like Japanese gourmet style restaurant at the Okura Hotel, which is a Japanese run hotel. We've been there twice, 3 times. That's always an amazing experience.
Nice, nice. Okay, let's go on to public transportation. Tell us, uh, do they have a subway system, buses? What kind
Mhm.
of, how could I get around Amsterdam?
Yeah, there's a subway system, which is sort of, it serves as sort of spine of the city. It doesn't get you everywhere, but a new line was opened up a few years ago, the North South line. Um, but you always, you can jump on, if the subway doesn't get you all the way to your destination, then you jump on a tram. So there's three forms of public transport. There's subways, there's trams, which are streetcars. They provide a little more, dense network service, and then there's finally buses. And so you can always get from A to B, usually in a maximum of two modes of transport.
Is like the town, or is everything walkable? Like if I wanted to go to the market, could I walk to the market? Or if I want to go to the pharmacy,
Mhm.
could I
Inside
walk to
the
the
inside the
pharmacy
ring, yeah,
in the
inside the
ring?
ring, most of the neighborhoods are dense and walkable enough that you can walk to a supermarket. Supermarkets are the largest supermarket chain is Albert Heijn. Uh, they're actually, oddly enough, they're owned by the multinational conglomerate Ahold, which grew out of it, which also owns I think like Giant in the United States.
Oh, wow.
It's a major East Coast grocery store chain that's actually owned by that same company, which grew out of the Netherlands. So Albert Heijn is they've got the near monopoly, on supermarkets. They've got one in every neighborhood, and then there's other supermarket chains called Jumbo, and then Dirk van den Broek is the discount one. But the idea is when you live in a dense and walkable neighborhood, you've almost always got a supermarket within walking distance.
And how about a pharmacy if I needed to pick up a prescription?
Yes, also
That
usually
too.
dense and
Okay.
walkable.
So all of that. So post
They're-
office, pretty much everything is
Yeah, well, post offices aren't what they used to be. The
no
postal
here
system has
either.
been completely privatized and sort of destroyed. So, there's no actual post offices anymore. There's
Oh,
postal
really?
services at usually tobacco stores. So
Okay.
usually the local tobacconist also doubles as a place
Mail.
where you can buy stamps and mail things and pick up packages. Your
Interesting.
question about the
Interesting.
pharmacy, I guess we could segue into the healthcare system.
Yeah, that's very good. Yep. So what's the healthcare system like? Is there a hospital near you? Tell us a little bit about private versus public.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all a private public system. So how health insurance works in the Netherlands is um, it's compulsory when you are a legal resident of the Netherlands. You have to have health insurance. You'll be fined if you don't have health insurance. And that, but by the same token, it also means that no insurer is allowed to deny you coverage for any reason whatsoever, for pre-existing conditions or whatever. They're compelled to cover you.
Even a
And
even a private?
well, they're all private. So how it works is the front end of the healthcare system, the front end of the health insurance system is private. You have to choose a private insurer. There's about 30 of them. You can comparison shop. I mean, the variations between them is actually limited in terms of actual coverage. They all offer the same core coverage. They're obliged to by law, but they may offer various deals or discounts, for accepting a more limited network or something like that. So yeah, none of them is allowed to, your insurance company doesn't ask you any questions about your pre-existing conditions. They wouldn't be allowed to anyways. They wouldn't be allowed to deny you coverage for that anyways. You just sign up with them and they check, they simply check. They do want to see a copy of your residence permit if you're a foreigner, which is like a credit card sized, biometric ID card that shows that you have the right to live in the Netherlands. The reason why they ask to see that, and that's if you show them that and they type in your Dutch social security number called your BSN, they'll accept you. But the reason why is because what I said is it's a private public system. The front end is private, and to your private insurance company you pay a premium of about varying from 100 to 140 a month, um, which sounds like a steal, compared to the USA. And there's an annual deductible varying from 350 to 850 euros total per year, meaning yeah, all of your any specialist care you get first comes out of that deductible, so that gets billed back to you in addition to your first few premium debits for the year. But once you've burned through that with specialist care or prescriptions or whatever, the rest is completely covered 100%. Visits to the GP, visits to your general practitioner are always 100% covered. The idea is you should never be afraid to go to your neighborhood doctor. And it does have to be your neighborhood doctor. This gets back to the point of walkability. You're actually obliged to choose a GP who is walking distance from where you live,
Whoa.
because they will make a house call if you need it.
Wow.
If you're that bad off, your doctor will come to your house.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That used to when I grew up, I mean, when I grew up in New York, and I think they did away with it in the 60s or 70s. But when I grew up, I remember my doctor did house calls, but you'd have to wait all day long for him to show up.
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately for me, I've never had anything be bad enough that I ever couldn't make it, on my own steam to the doctor's office. So, where it's actually paid for, I said it's private public, but where, of course, the cost of it is actually paid for is paid out of your taxes. So obviously 140 a month isn't going to be enough, for your health insurer to actually cover your actual costs of healthcare, especially if you need specialist care or if you have a chronic condition. But in reality, they claim it back from the government. So the government refuses to pay them unless they can prove that their customer, has a valid immigration status, because those are the only people who are eligible for insurance. But it is a managed care system. It can be described, by comparison to HMOs in the US. There's
US.
no if you go directly to a specialist, you'll have to pay for it yourself. I mean, if you really, 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 wanted to like circumvent your GP and insist that you wanted to go to a specialist or something like that, you want to go to the dermatologist to get that mole lasered off that your GP told you is not cancerous and it's not nothing to worry about, then you have to pay for it. But if you get a referral, then it's paid for. So it's all about getting the referral from your GP.
So, and I know we'll talk about visas in just a little bit, how to obtain one, but usually in the EU, and I know from Spain, one of the requirements are if you're coming over and getting residency, they require you to have health care. And in this case, in Spain's case, they require you at least 1 year of the private system. But the private system, the problem is they don't accept pre-existing conditions.
Mm. Yeah, I think the Netherlands used to have a system something like that. Um, I can say there is no EU in this area. By the way, this is not a subject of EU law, so it's not. It's sort of the EU can be understood by comparison to the U.S. constitutional system. I'm sort of verging into my field of academia. Um, just like in the U.S., the federal government doesn't set traffic rules and doesn't regulate every single little thing. The EU also doesn't regulate every single little thing. So the subject of healthcare is not an area that the EU is empowered to legislate on. It just happens through the development of Europe after World War II, diverging from the way the United States developed, is that every European country has a decent functioning
Healthcare.
universal healthcare system, but the details of how they work out do vary widely among European countries. So there's no conclusions to be drawn about it works this way in Spain, therefore it has to work this way in the Netherlands. I'd
Right.
say the Dutch system is pretty good. There's no catch-22s here.
It sounds awesome.
There's nothing in immigration law where they say you have to first get health coverage on your own before we let you into the system. The idea is, if you're allowed in, then you're allowed into the system.
How close are you to a hospital? Is that walking distance?
No, the nearest. Well, yeah. I mean, you just go. I mean,
If you're ill, you're not going to
there's
really walk anyway.
there's five major hospitals in Amsterdam. Um, I mean, well, yeah. You mean like an emergency room, like if something was really bad.
Yeah.
Oh, in that sense. I mean, yeah. Again, also those concepts of like urgent care and stuff like that. Like they have where the healthcare system is not so reliant on emergency room treatment as it is in the U.S. The idea is if it's an urgent care-ish situation, you call your GP. If it's
Okay.
an urgent care-ish, you're walking to your local doctor's office. If it's something like minor stitches you need or something like that, that's something you get from your GP.
Okay.
Or minor burns.
They do
or
that?
whatever. What?
They do stitches?
Yeah,
GPs?
yeah.
Wow.
If it was something really small, if it was a little, I remember once the last time I went to the GP for an emergency. It was one morning I went to the gym and it was one of those days that I was just not in the mood to be there. I was like, oh God, I hate the gym. I didn't want to get up early for this. And I was in the locker room and bent over putting something in my gym bag, and I had left the door to my locker open. There was this,
Oh, you hit your
and I
head.
stood up really. I stood up and hit the back of my head,
Uh,
against the point of the door, pointing down, and my head just started bleeding like a stuck pig, and like blood like completely matting my hair, and they were like, the
I can
staff was all
relate.
coming, and they're like, giving me a towel. So I immediately called the GP. I said, like, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and so went in. She saw me within like 5 minutes. Got on
Wow.
my bicycle and went there. I mean, I wasn't walking distance from the GP anymore, but
Wow.
still mobile enough that I could get on my bicycle and go there. While holding my head. And she said, "Yo,
Oh, it's
well,
so scary. The blood
oh,"
coming from your head.
she said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, well, oh no, this will heal. This doesn't need stitches." She said, "Here, just." She literally said, "Let's actually just." Well, how did she say it? She literally sort of like tied some of my hairs into a little knot, up there to hold it together.
That's so funny.
That's my one experience with an urgent care situation. If that were on the weekend, what you'd have to do is there's a number you'd call for the local on duty GP. There'd be like an on duty emergency GP, and they would talk to you on the phone and be like, "Is this bad enough?" And if it is bad enough, they would say, "Okay, come in." And then there's that urgent care GP clinic at one of the local medical centers. So for me, the nearest hospital is well, if it were that bad, I would take a taxi. It would be like a 8-minute taxi ride away, I guess. Otherwise, I could get there by bicycle in 20 minutes.
Do you think doctors in the hospital, like if you had an emergency, let's say I just moved here from the States
Hmm.
and I had an emergency, I had to go to the hospital, you think they speak English?
Of course they do. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no, especially if somebody's highly educated, if somebody has an academic education in the Netherlands, they have to speak English. I mean,
okay.
half of the materials that they would have used, to study medicine would have been,
English.
medical journal articles in English. That is the international language of science nowadays.
So let's segue into how to obtain a visa.
Mhm.
So and tell us like the different types of visas.
Mhm.
I don't believe they have a retirement visa. Is that
No,
correct?
no, yeah. So the Netherlands, the notion of Dutch immigration law is based on the concept of it's based on the precept that the Netherlands is full. That there's enough people here already, and that there's a
So they don't
shortage of
want us.
housing. No, not just there's no. So if you're a non-EU citizen, Dutch immigration law does not provide for any facility just to be able to be here and be self-supporting. They don't care how rich you are. They don't care if you bought a 1.5 million euro canal mansion. Um, they don't care, if you say, "Oh, I'm going to be completely self-supporting, and I'm not going to be violent." They don't say, "I don't care." They would say, "Yeah, we don't care. We don't want you
So,
here, like taking up the scarce housing stock."
so
The
how
only
do,
way,
what are the ways?
the only ways are either you're an EU citizen, um, and EU citizens have freedom of movement. EU citizens are allowed to come here not
Sure.
just for work, but also just to be self-supporting if they want to live here.
Hmm.
Or the only
Marriage.
category of non-EU citizens who's allowed to just move here is there is one harmonized thing in the EU, is that all EU countries have a harmonized system for granting permanent residence permit called long-term resident. So if you got a permanent residence permit in another EU country by living there for 5 years and usually passing a language exam or something like that, then that does entitle you to move here as an economically inactive person. In that case, if you got, the long-term resident status in Italy or in Germany, and you showed up here and said, "Look, I'm just retired. Here's my pension. Here's a couple 10,000 in savings that I have." They'd be like, "Okay, sure, that's
They
fine.
would let you
You can live here."
stay.
In that case, that's allowed. But if you're a non-EU citizen with no connection, or so then the next tier is you're a non-EU citizen, but you have a connection to an EU citizen who's living here. Then
Connection how? Marriage
family connection.
connection?
Yeah, like
Family.
yeah, and we're talking nuclear family. We're talking like not your
Or
sister, brother, aunt, uncle, cousin. We're talking the nuclear family is this unit that's limited to the partner or spouse, and or you're a child under 18 of that unit. And
Oh,
so if you have
so
one of
that's
those
it.
family relationships, if you're the minor age child of somebody who legally resides here, or if you are the partner or spouse of an EU citizen legally residing here, you can get a right to stay here. Or if you're the partner or spouse of another non-EU citizen who got a, say, work-related right to be here, like so work-related migration. This is outside of the field of retirement, but maybe
Right.
you might still have a few working years
Well,
left
I'm
before
still
you're
working.
thinking exactly. So work-related migration is, well, so that's either your family member of an EU citizen, then it's more or less automatic. Your family member of a Dutch citizen, your Dutch citizen partner has to simply prove that they make enough money to support you. The interesting thing about Dutch immigration law, by the way, as far as that goes, as far as partners or marriage goes, and this is one thing that I'm very proud of, where the Netherlands has always been very progressive, more than anywhere else in the world, is the Netherlands does not require you to get married. There's no requirement to get married, even though, of course, we are the first country in the world to have introduced same-sex marriage in 2001. Even long before that, since the 70s, it has been possible to immigrate to the Netherlands as the unmarried partner in a long-term relationship of either a man or a woman. Like there was already like gay family migration in the Netherlands starting in about 1975, and that's one
So
of the coolest
if
things.
you're not married, how do you prove that you're in a relationship?
Yeah, so then it's what's called a de facto stable relationship, where you simply prove by other means that you share your life with this person, that you are
Bank
life
accounts
partners.
and stuff like that,
Bank accounts, leases,
bills.
history of travel together, photo albums. Yeah.
So you don't have to be legally married, but you have to live with someone or be a partner with someone
hmm
outside of the Netherlands to get in.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, for instance, I mean, if you had a vacation, if let's imagine you weren't married, let's imagine you had a romance with a Dutch guy that you met in Jamaica, or something like that, and then you dated, you had a long distance relationship, and you maintained your relationship with video chatting, and you flew back and forth to visit each other, and you went on vacations together, and you could prove plane tickets from that, prove that you put in effort into maintaining your relationship and developing it. Then you could get a right to stay in the Netherlands if they want to. If your boyfriend wants to sponsor you, then you can get a right to stay in the Netherlands based on that evidence of a durable and exclusive relationship having been
relationship.
built up. Yeah.
That's cool. Very
That's what
cool.
I'm really proud of. That I really love. That's one thing. I'm very happy being married. I'm extremely happily married, but Um, I'm also glad that there was no pressure on me and my husband to get married. Well, I mean, of course I became Dutch through my first marriage. Of course, I'm with my second marriage. That was the practice one, but I was also very, but I mean, I'm also glad that in Dutch culture, even straight people don't get married a lot of the time. Some, people have kids. Straight
Right.
people like
It's
move
just
in together, have
marriage is
kids, buy a
not,
house together.
yep.
They don't feel pressure to get married here. There's no idea of you have to be married to get access to your partner when they're lying in the hospital, for instance. That's one thing
See,
that's really cool here.
that's a big thing because here in the States, it's totally opposite. So,
hmm
you have to be married. You have to show proof that that your spouse, you're a spouse.
Yeah,
So,
I think that goes back to like the crazy liability culture in the U.S.
yeah,
Like everyone's afraid of a lawsuit there,
right.
and that's one thing that's
Everybody.
so refreshing here. So refreshing. That's one thing that's nice. I can also, from my lawyer's perspective, I can say about this is where a different legal system really makes a difference, and the fact that there's no crazy lawsuit culture here. That
I
doesn't
love
exist.
that. I
There's
love
none of
that.
that fear of liability. None of that. And so that also makes it that certain prices don't get driven up, due to liability related reasons. But that was one cool. I mean, it's not my field of the law that I'm most passionate about. Torts. I had torts my first semester of Dutch law school. I was like, oh god, this is so boring. I hate it. But torts, is what we call it. That's what the notion of liability, of suing somebody for the damages they caused you.
Mm-hmm.
But the most valuable lesson, first semester of law school, you learn in Dutch law school that liability is limited to the actual damages you suffered, the actual financial. Put a euro sign on what is the actual financial damage that you suffered. That's the most you can get out of somebody who injured you or wronged you in some way. There's no punitive damages. There's no pain and suffering damages. It would literally be, you crashed into my car. I had to pay 3,500 euros to get the body work done. That's what I get out of it, in liability.
So getting back to visas. So bottom line really is the only ways to get into the Netherlands would be from somebody living there.
Yeah, I always like to build up dramatic tension. Be like, sort of first clear out the notions that you'll be welcome here simply because you have money. Clear out the notion that you're just, that you're welcome to rock up. Clear out the notion, but I will say, if you are lucky enough to have a partner who's established here, that's a nice way to come. Immigrating for love is a good way to do it. But if you don't have that, if you're two non-EU citizens who are married to each other and neither of you has a connection to the Netherlands and you want to move here, what can you do? And for US citizens, there's one very, very, very nice facility that does allow you to kind of move here on your own steam without being sponsored by an employer. Work-related migration, by the way, means typically being sponsored by an employer who wants to pay you a high salary. If you're recruited by a big corporation here like Philips, or Heineken, and they want to pay you a salary over 70,000 a year, of course, then that's taken care of.
They'll let me.
Then you'll be allowed it for the purpose of that job. And you have to toe the line. You have to toe the line with your employer, or always make sure to find an employer who pays you enough for 5 years until you can finally get your permanent residence permit, and then you can just be yourself. That's how it always works. You always have to, your first 5 years in the Netherlands are always your probationary period in immigration law. You always have to toe the line. That means, jump through the hoop of whatever condition is on your stay for 5 years before you get your independent right of stay.
So if I get my $70,000 job and I get laid off, didn't that happen to you?
Then you better find a new employer. Yeah, that happened to me. I came here as a work-related migrant. And the company went bankrupt 2 weeks after I arrived. That was my first residence permit was work related. I had to really scramble to find that. I had to scramble to find a new employer right away.
Otherwise, they let you go back.
It was gone.
They deport you back.
So yeah, exactly. And but so I'm just so if you're not lucky enough to be an EU citizen, if you're not lucky enough to already have a long-term resident permit from another EU country, if you're not lucky enough to have a partner who's an EU citizen, and if you're not lucky enough to have a partner who himself or herself has a residence permit for work that can sponsor you, or you're not lucky enough to yourself be sponsored for work, what is your option? Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, have I got news for you? There is a treaty that the Netherlands somewhat unwittingly signed with the United States in 1956 called the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. And this was part of a sort of friendship offensive that the U.S. was going on. It was the Cold War. The U.S. was trying to sign these treaties with as many countries as possible to sort of outcompete the Soviet Union on the charm offensive. And you look at this treaty nowadays, and most of it is really anodyne. Most of it is just we're going to be friends, and we'll have free trade with each other, and, nationals of one signatory state will have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, when they're on the territory of the other one. There's all sort of obvious stuff. But in the 90s, Dutch immigration lawyers dusted off this treaty, and they discovered that there was a really interesting provision in it. And it said that that each signatory state, the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the United States of America, was obliged to allow citizens of the other country to legally reside in their territory for the purpose of developing and running a business in which they have invested a substantial amount of capital. And what makes the Netherlands so attractive for US citizens relying on this provision of the treaty is that the notion of a substantial amount of capital has not been revised since 1956. So
Whoa.
what was a lot of money in 1956, 10,000 Dutch guilders, is now 4,500 euros. So it means any US citizen who starts any kind of business in the Netherlands, even if it's a little freelance operation, even if it's a little DBA, and they can invest 4,500 euros in their business, meaning put it in your business, don't take it out. It's sort of, you see it as a deposit.
Mm-hmm.
I always describe it as like a game of bowling. Like when you go to the bowling alley and you put down a $20 deposit on your bowling shoes, it means, if you run out of money, you can't go back and say, oh, well, I'll hand in the shoes, you give me back my $20 so I can pay for a few more games of bowling. No, that's it. Then it's game over. But the idea is you're putting a 4,500 euro deposit, so to speak, on your residence permit. By making it, it makes it that your business always has a reserve if it goes bankrupt, that it can pay off its debtors with. But based on that, the treaty says that means then that the Dutch government is obliged to give you a residence permit for the purpose of being an entrepreneur without subjecting you to the normal requirement of Dutch immigration law of having to prove what the added value is of your business to the Dutch economy. And that's a really big privilege, because normally to get a residence permit as an entrepreneur here, it's really hard. It's really
Wow.
about like demonstrating what is the concrete interest of the Dutch economy that you're serving with that business. What is the unique selling point that you have? What do you have going on that no other business here is offering? But with the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty, the U.S. citizen is exempt. And then the U.S. citizen's spouse will get a right to stay here, no questions asked. And the U.S. citizen's children will get the right to stay here, no questions asked.
So
So that
let's
is
say,
the...
so let's say I have a business, where do gays retire? And I put in $5,000 in my software, all the, the everything that my computer equipment, my microphone, all my monthly stuff.
Mhm.
And I get my income is from people if I have a subscription or something
Mhm.
like that.
You can
So
do that.
that's a viable
Mhm.
possibility.
Mhm. Yeah, it's best to make the investment in the form of cash, of course,
Yeah,
because your microphone and your laptop depreciate.
right.
If you spend exactly 4,500 euros on a brand new microphone and brand new laptop, well, guess what? Next month it's not worth 4,500 euros anymore.
Okay.
It's already lost value. So that's not the best way to make your investment. The best way is just to
Put it in cash.
put the cash in the bank, in a bank account belonging to your business, and leave it there. It's about maintaining that level of
I like
equity in your
that. I like
business.
that
Yeah.
little loophole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a loophole, but of course, I, and it's it's not for everybody though. There's some people they say, "Wow, how is it so easy?" And I say, "Yeah, really. I mean,
But it's
yes, if
not
you
real
really wanted it,
easy.
I can get it for you. If you have 4,500 euros and if you have a U.S. passport, I can get you this residence permit. But I have to often the people who doesn't work out for are the people who turn out not to be really dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneurs who don't have, you know, when it doesn't work out with their business." And they come to me and they say, "Hey, can I pick up a job on the side working at a bookshop or working at a restaurant?" No, that's not allowed. It's one
Has
big
to be your
restriction.
business.
You have to be working for yourself.
And does that, oh, so you have to do that for at least 5 years to become a
Mm-hmm.
permanent resident.
Yeah.
And then after that 5 year period, can you retire?
Yeah, exactly. If you applied for the permanent residence permit,
Right.
which typically requires you to pass a Dutch exam.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would say from day one, make
Right.
an effort to learn.
Yep.
Don't expect that you'll pick it up. Um, Normally you would have to, so after 5 years, you would have to pass that exam, or within the 5 years, you pass the exam. And at the 5 year point, you prove, look, I passed the exam and I have sufficient stable resources to support myself, which is actually not that much. And
Mm-hmm.
that's considered to be about 2,000 a month for a couple.
Yep.
Then you'll get a permanent residence permit, and then you can completely retire.
Mm. Sounds really good. It sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy. So let's how about the tax structure while we're on like the immigration
Mm-hmm.
visa? The tax structure, do I know I have to pay US taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I come over, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then do I pay US taxes
Well, you
and
know,
have to pay Netherlands taxes?
yeah. Well, let me start off by explaining. A lot of U.S. citizens are really surprised to find out that the US is the oddball in the world. They think it's the most normal thing in the world that a country charges its citizens taxes wherever they live in the world. And nobody does that. Nobody else does that in the world except for Eritrea. The United States and Eritrea are the only two countries in the world that have citizenship based taxation. So we'll start off with that. We'll start off with the U.S. is the oddball in the world. So the U.S. is the so that said, when you're a U.S. citizen living abroad, so you do have to file U.S. taxes. Um, that said, most of the time, your obligation to actually pay U.S. taxes is mitigated. The U.S. has what's called avoidance of double taxation agreements with most countries in the world, including the Netherlands. So how that works out in practice is the IRS offers one of two avoidance of double taxation schemes. It's either um, you file your U.S. taxes and you say, "Look, I earned less than I don't know, it's 130,000 U.S. dollars last year," and you say, "Look, I wasn't in the U.S." You have to fill in all the dates that you entered and left the U.S. to prove that you were there for less than I don't know how many 180 days. I'm a human rights lawyer, not a tax lawyer, so
Right.
nobody sue me. Nobody sue me in a U.S. court,
This is hypothetical.
for yeah, exactly. This I'm giving as I'm admitting as a lawyer, this is not my field of actual expertise.
Okay.
So
That's fine.
no one can get that pain and suffering damages out of me in a New York court or something
Especially
like
in
that.
the US.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but so it's either you earn less than a certain amount,
Hmm.
130K, and you say to the IRS, "Look, I don't live in the U.S. I live in the Netherlands." And they say, "Okay, good, and then you're exempt. You owe us nothing. Thanks for filing." Or it's you earn more than that amount, and you say, "But I don't live in the U.S. I live in the Netherlands." And so you say, "I earned X, and I paid Y in Dutch taxes, but if I lived in the U.S., I would have paid Z in U.S. income taxes." So they subtract Y from Z, and then obviously if it's negative, it's not like you get money back, but they'll say, okay, then it's zero. You paid more taxes in the Netherlands than you would have paid in U.S. taxes. Therefore, your net what you owe us net is zero.
So do I pay Netherlands taxes first
Yeah.
and
So
then
the Netherlands is a modern country. The Netherlands is a normal country in the world, which means it's a residence based tax system. Whoever lives in the Netherlands pays Dutch taxes. Whoever lives in the Netherlands is domiciled for all intents and purposes in the Netherlands and has to pay Dutch income tax. So you would pay that first, and then you would file your U.S. taxes based on that. But yeah, taxes is another reason that people say to me, "Oh, can it be really that easy to move to the Netherlands?" I'm like, well, first you gotta decide that you're willing to be restricted to only working in self-employment. Second of all, there's things about the Dutch tax system that really scare a lot of Americans, especially a lot of wealthy Americans. Um,
it's one thing to look into,
there's
yes.
one thing to look into. You got to talk to a tax lawyer here,
Mhm.
called a fiscalist. You got to talk to a tax lawyer and talk about what your maximum exposure would be to the Dutch tax system, because yeah, you're going to pay more taxes than you're used to in the U.S. I mean,
Right.
this is one of these interesting things where the borderlines between progressive and conservative are very different here. A lot of Americans who
That's
think of
because of the
themselves as
services
progressive,
too.
yeah, a lot of Americans who think of themselves as progressive, if they're wealthy, they'll be at the conservative end of the Dutch spectrum if they come here and they are upset about how much they get taxed. A
Yeah.
lot of that's unfortunately the legacy of Reagan that and Clinton. That in the U.S. it's become seen as indispensable to become wealthy, because of course you have to, if you don't want to end up destitute, because there's no safety net. And so a lot of normal, I do see this in my practice. A lot of people who think of themselves as normal, that I'm only wealthy because I had to be, I had to save this money, I had to put this all in my 401k. They're shocked when they move here and they find out there's a wealth tax. That's one thing that's really shocking for wealthy
I
Americans.
looked into that in Spain too. There is
you
a
get
wealth
taxed on
tax.
your
There's
wealth,
an
not just on
inheritance
your.
tax,
Yeah.
and wealth tax is based upon global assets.
Mm-hmm. So not just capital gains, but you're literally taxed on the value of your assets that are just sitting somewhere.
Right. Yep. So, and the difference is also, U.S. wealthy people usually don't pay taxes because there's so many loopholes, and that's probably how they become wealthy. But anyway, that's besides the point. But in the EU, and you get services for your taxes. So you pay taxes and Social Security all your life, and you get health care, which is not a privilege. You get all of those services, whereas we probably pay less taxes and get less services. So
Yes, you get something for it. You get something
right,
that's worth it. But you're gonna be it's living here is expensive. I mean, how no, scrap that to the point. What was I gonna say? Just the quality of infrastructure. The
right,
fact there's no
right.
potholes in the road.
It's
The fact the public transit works.
yes. So, are there any cons living in Amsterdam or the Netherlands in general, as opposed to living in the U.S., Pittsburgh, or anywhere else?
Well, I haven't moved back yet. I'm testimonial to it. I mean, I I go back. It's fun seeing friends. There are places in the world that are more exciting than Amsterdam. Amsterdam it's still a small city.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of sleepy city in its own way. It has its exciting pockets. It has a really good, that's good. It's a decent queer scene. Really, really cool underground stuff. That's my thing. A lot of good underground dance parties. A lot of good nice nightclubs. Where you can go all night. For a nice queer party on the edge of the city. We do that well here. But it's still a small city. You just have to keep in mind it's a small city. It's sleepy in a certain way. It's not definitely doesn't stack up to the mega cities of the world. It doesn't stack up in terms of excitingness to the Berlins and the Londons and the New Yorks of the world. It's a small city. It's and
Got it.
cons. Yeah, I mean other cons. I mean, for me, it's nice. I love having government services. I love having things being taken care of. I love knowing there's a social safety net. Um, and I'm willing to take the things that come in exchange for that. Not just that you pay taxes, but also that the government is up in your shit here in ways that people would not believe in the U.S. It's like the one. It's I liken it to living in a gated community. Like the gated communities in the U.S. where the homeowners association is all up in your business about what
Yep.
color you paint your house and what
Yep.
kind of Christmas decorations you're allowed to put out. That's the entire Netherlands.
Wow.
The entire Netherlands is zoned out the wazoo. There's this notion of, even if you own a property, you're not just free to do with it whatever you want. You have to you have to, if you even want to build, if you want to build so much as a little um little extra window in your roof. See, you can see across the street from you. You see this sort of tiled roof
Yeah.
there.
You have to
If
get
you
permission.
own one of those apartments and you wanted to break through the roof to build a little Eve style window sticking out, you would have to ask the local planning commission. They might say no. They might say that doesn't fit into the look of this neighborhood. That doesn't fit into the architectural style. If you have an older house, if you have a house that has monumental status, where it's 150 or 200 years old, you're really limited in the things you're allowed to do. You're not even so much as allowed to, like, put a nail in the wall to hang up a painting in your own
Wow.
apartment. If it's monumental status, then you're not allowed to damage that stuff. You have to suspend. You would have to suspend your painting from, like, find a wood beam in the ceiling and suspend it from there. When I first moved here, I put out my trash on the wrong night. And at that time, there was still, nowadays, there's the trash is done really nicely in Amsterdam. They've got these underground containers where you drop your
Spain
general
that has
trash
that
into
too.
whenever you want, and you also have, like, there's a glass container and a paper container, and
Right, for
you can take your
recycles.
trash out whenever you want nowadays. But when I first moved here, there were certain pickup days for every neighborhood, and if you put your trash out on the wrong day, somebody from the municipality would come along, they'd grab that trash bag, they would take it back to whatever, special uh trash
Disposal.
secret police headquarters were, tear open your trash bag wearing gloves and look for anything with your name and address on it, and then send you a fine you like €100 for
Oh my God.
putting out your trash on the wrong day.
Big Brother's watching. So, in wrapping up, Jeremy, what would you say to our audience if they're considering relocating to Amsterdam like you did?
I would say, understand that Amsterdam's crowded, understand that Amsterdam has limited housing stock, understand that, do please learn Dutch. Please learn Dutch and ring your neighbors' doorbells and get to know them, because um, there is generally getting to be a feeling that Amsterdam has become overrun with quote unquote expats, and so, realize that it is a wonderful city to live in. I mean, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world, but there is resentment. Um, people. One newspaper called expats moving into sort of formerly working class neighborhoods of Amsterdam that used to have a lot of social cohesion, where everybody knew each other. People moving in those neighborhoods, they're called Pokemon zombies, based on all their neighbors ever see them doing is, like, walking down the street, staring at their Google Maps, or staring at their phone, following their social media, and and going into their apartment and coming out again while still staring at their screens.
Did
I
you
just
drop
broke
something?
I broke a plate. Yeah, unfortunately, the plate with the. I'm really sorry.
I'll edit that.
Okay.
All right.
Don't leave
Well,
on the background, please.
oh,
I had to. Oh, I was so stupid. I had to demonstrate by walking and showing what a Pokemon zombie looks like, that I
oh,
actually
I'm sorry.
didn't look out and I destroyed a plate.
But anyway, Jeremy, and we're going to wrap it up now. And I just want to thank you so much for doing this and taking the time to, twice to speaking, meeting you, and now doing the podcast. It was a pleasure learning so much about Amsterdam and the Netherlands. And thank you again so much.
Thank you for having me on here. It was nice to talk about it. Nice to share, something about life and what I think is,
It
yeah,
was my pleasure.
best city in the world, to be
Really
honest.
my really my pleasure. So thank you again, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Bye bye.